Alrighty, thank you very much. We are ready to begin because we do need to conclude at noon. Thank you very much. Alrighty, let me just remind you that each person who would like to respond to the question will be given a maximum of 2 minutes. That way we are able to then allow 2 minutes from each speaker for their concluding statement. First of all, thank you very much to all of you that submitted questions. As you see, we have a lot of interest in this topic, which is what we are happy to see. In the essence of time and in the essence of the time that our speakers have, we have reduced the stack of questions down to very general questions that hopefully are reflective of the most commonly asked questions, the most commonly stated topic that was included in your question. So hopefully you will understand that. Also, we wanted to indicate that we do not use inflammatory or attacking questions or statements. Again, thank you for your interest with all of the questions. So with that in mind, are our speakers ready to go?
Sure.
Thank you. And you can see our timer, Jennifer, right? The first question is regarding Senate Bill 2 in the California Senate. How would this affect either a pass or fail of Proposition P? Senate Bill 2 in the California Senate. How would this affect either a pass or fail of Proposition P?
I'm assuming that they're referring to Senate Bill 4. Does that make sense?
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, Senate Bill 4 is the legislation that was passed and signed by the governor, and it places the strictest regulations on hydraulic fracturing in the nation. And what it's got interim measures were put in place immediately, and now the Daugherty Division of Oil and Gas are doing studies, an environmental impact report to study the impacts of hydraulic fracturing. And then they will finalize the regulations once that study is done. Currently, what the regulations require are notification, pre and post notification to all neighbors. It must be done through a third party, so making sure that everyone gets notice of any kind of those actions. There's pre and post testing of air and water. There's disclosure of the list of chemicals, so it goes on and on. It's a very comprehensive piece of legislation to regulate hydraulic fracturing. If Measure P passes, it would really have no impact on us in Santa Barbara because there wouldn't be any hydraulic fracturing going on down here. If Measure P does not pass, it would provide that extra layer of oversight. But as you may have heard, in Santa Barbara County, the geology is really not appropriate for hydraulic fracturing, so it's not being used in this area.
Thank you for the question. Senate Bill 4 applies to a couple types of high-intensity petroleum operations, the fracking and the acidizing that are referenced in Measure P. It does not apply to the steam injection operations, which are covered by Measure P, so that's one difference. I also find it fascinating at all these hearings and forums I go to now where the oil industry talks about how wonderful Senate Bill 4 is and how California has such great regulations when in fact the industry vociferously opposed Senate Bill 4 when it was going through the state legislative process. But I'm glad that they're on board now and think it's a great law. Senate Bill 4 also only deals with what we call the downhole aspects of oil and gas development. So, how the drilling occurs, what kind of safety requirements are required. Senate Bill did add some other requirements to the existing laws. Measure P talks about where, not how, but where this oil drilling occurs, just like with any other land use regulation. Oil and gas drilling is not allowed in residential neighborhoods. That's allowed because the local agencies like the County of Santa Barbara decide where different land uses occur. So with Senate Bill 4, that talks about how drilling occurs, if it's involving fracking or acidization, does not cover steam injection, and does not cover the types of land uses and where they're allowed to ensure compatibility with other surrounding land uses. That's what Measure P addresses.
Excuse me, point of order. How are we, is it just two people can respond to this question, or do any of us?
Any and all of you
Okay,
are being asked to respond to all of these questions.
Okay. I would like to add to the response to SB4. First off, SB4 is the way things are supposed to be done. It's a representative process where all the parties come together and discuss the technical issues. That's not what Measure P is doing. Measure P is trying to force the views of a minority on the rest of us without any vetting of that nature, without any of the science about it. And by the way, I do take issue with Ms. Krop's comment or characterization about the oil industry. I actually worked on SB4 on behalf of the industry, and what we were trying to do was make it a better thing, to make it based on science, to make it really work. Instead, you get folks who pile things in that don't know anything about the industry, and what ends up is something that's not workable, doesn't achieve anybody's goals. So to characterize us as opposing it, yeah, we opposed the original bill, and we worked carefully, and by the way, ultimately we supported SB4. I think that's a point of record. Thank you.
And I'll just add too that there were a lot of environmental organizations that opposed that bill because they didn't believe it was strong enough. They had a lot of concerns about it, and they are now seeing that there's some failures to do reporting as required. Also, you know, even if you are testing your water, the problem is if you're testing it and you find out it's contaminated, what do you do? So regulation only gets you so far, even if it was great and comprehensive and we did all the testing in the world. You know, it doesn't, what happens when your water's contaminated, it's just gone. And to Linda's point, it doesn't cover steam injection. And so I mentioned the project that Freeport-McMoRan is doing in Lompoc and the Vandenberg Village Services District, appealing that. One of the things they asked for, they said, you mean you're not testing? You're not going to test the water? We will have no idea if this is going to, you know, if this pollutes the aquifer. So they were trying to get Freeport-McMoRan to test it, and they eventually agreed to have some testing, but they're not required to, and I think they'll be a lot less accommodating if Measure P doesn't pass. Right now, they're a little more accommodating. They don't have to do it. They don't have to do, there's no testing of water of this for these operations that could be going through our aquifers.
Thank you. Our next question, again, is a general one. What alternative energy methods are being researched for our county, and what monies or what are the oil producers doing to help? Let me state it again. What alternative energy methods are being researched for our county, and what are the oil producers doing to help?
I'd like to respond to that first, if I don't mind, ladies. You know, actually, it's interesting, and the second part of that question is the part that I'd really like to share. Actually, the oil companies are the primary ones who are developing and evolving alternative and renewable projects. To give you an example, Chevron is the largest producer of geothermal energy in the world. Chevron's a California corporation. They're the largest producer of oil in California, the largest refiner. They create lots of jobs. On top of that, ExxonMobil, they've invested tens of millions of dollars to try to figure out how to get energy out of algae. And then you have a lot of solar projects. Chevron has a huge solar array project over in the Kern Valley. So, and we, our little company, what we're doing is we're trying to reduce, reuse, recycle. We're out there using the reclaimed water, building a water line, paying for it, giving it to the county, buying the water back, water that would otherwise be re-injected down in the ground, way down in the ground. We were instrumental in setting up a conservation bank to protect the California tiger salamander. Instrumental in doing that. That didn't exist before. So when you talk about alternatives and renewables and our environment, the oil industry is front and center doing that. Actually, we're energy companies. We get it. We understand that as we go forward, we need oil and gas for the foreseeable future. Including the Environmental Defense Fund, the national organization, recently said, we get it. We need oil. The federal government says we need it. So why do we keep importing it? That's a good way to look at alternative and renewables, is to produce it here in the most environmentally sensitive and sound way we can and stop importing foreign oil. Over 60%, 1 to 1.3 million barrels a day. That's what we're doing every day in California. There's a hypocrisy about that, isn't there?
I welcome the oil industry in Santa Barbara County to help us with this conversion as well. I mentioned in my talk earlier that the county recently approved the Cuyama Solar Project, which is our first commercial scale photovoltaic solar project in the county. It's a fabulous project and was approved by the County Board of Supervisors recently. There was also a wind energy project that was approved a few years ago that ended up, it was approved by the county with a lot of support from the environmental community. Unfortunately, for internal and other reasons, it wasn't built, but we look forward to the revival of either that project or something similar. Santa Barbara County is actually a leader, not coming from industry, but from the county, where they have researched all of their existing facilities, so buildings, parking lots, all the property that the county owns, and they are slowly building solar and other efficiency mechanisms so that they will end up being net energy neutral for all the county facilities. Fabulous, fabulous model, fabulous precedent. They've already started some of their projects. They're also adopting a climate action plan that will deal with county-wide operations, not just county-owned and operated facilities. So our county is definitely taking a lot of wonderful steps in this direction. I would also direct you to a report that was prepared by the Community Environmental Council, Fossil Free by 33, which looks at our region and talks about how we can take actions to, again, be energy and greenhouse gas emission neutral by 2033. So Fossil Free by 33, you can go on the Community Environmental Council website. So that gives a whole host of options, not just for the governmental agencies, but we as citizens can participate in those kind of programs. So great question. I think the future is bright, and I think we can definitely accomplish this right here in our own county.
And I would also add, I'm very excited about the opportunities for Santa Barbara County in the areas of renewable energy. These are great job creators. There are actually already now 40,000 people in California employed in the solar industry. That is amazing, and it's growing rapidly. That's compared to somewhere in the range of about 16,000 in oil and gas operations and refineries. So solar is great, and it's good to see these projects start coming through. She mentioned the CEC has done this study. The interesting thing about that study, about our locally, if we could produce as much energy as we use renewable energy, fossil free by 33. What they found is we would actually save money by doing that, because your investment in those kinds of energies pays off over such a long period of time. So I think it's very, very encouraging. We have a lot of research going on at UCSB and energy efficiency and new technology, so a lot of potential new businesses could be created here. The thing I worry about is when I look at the state legislative process and nationally, the fossil fuel industry tends to fight these policies that encourage renewable energy. They discourage them, they see it as competition. So I think it's great if I would welcome them to make that transition, but I'm not seeing that from the legislation that I'm watching. I'm seeing the reverse. And in fact, if you think about the mayor of Lancaster, Republican mayor of Lancaster, and the city council there, they had some pretty interesting legislation they passed there that requires all new buildings to have solar on it. And I think it's no accident that there is no oil in Lancaster. I think if you wouldn't see the same kind of legislation happening in Bakersfield. I'm really worried if the oil industry ramps up here, they will work against policies that discourage renewable energy. They will elect officials that will let them do whatever they want to do. They've shown that they will put plenty of money into our politics, try to make sure they have supervisors that will vote their way and let them do whatever they want to do. So I feel like Measure P will help us with renewable energy in Santa Barbara County.
I have to say, we're all in favor of a balanced approach. We're all in favor of reducing our energy consumption. That needs to be done by each and every one of us. But you don't leave your job until you have another one set up. And currently, we don't have another energy source that's going to supply our needs for oil. All of our transportation needs, all of our tractors in our fields for our agricultural fields that we need to keep moving in Santa Barbara County. We don't have a solution for that. We are all for moving forward with those solutions. But an absolute ban does nothing to stop the demand that we have currently in this county. We're an affluent county. We're probably one of the most energy intensive counties in the United States, given the amount of money that we have in this county. So we need to look at everything. It needs to be a balanced approach. That's what CEQA, that's what the California Environmental Quality Act teaches us. It's a balancing of environmental impacts with economic goals. And let me talk to you about a couple of the very innovative projects that oil companies are doing here, because we are people. We are not demons. We are real people, and we care about where we live. Up in Price Canyon in San Luis Obispo, Freeport-McMoRan has developed a $70 million water treatment facility. It's a reverse osmosis treatment facility where they take water. You know, every time you produce oil from the formations here, you get a lot of old brackish water. Katie would call it toxic or contaminated, but it's brackish old seawater. They clean it to such a level that they've got permits from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the county to be able to re-inject that into the creek, where fish now can be reintroduced. These are fabulous, fabulous projects that are being incorporated by using technology. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is very general. What do you see are the specific impacts of proposition on inflation? So what's the specific impact on inflation?
None. I mean, the status quo is not affected. Any existing oil operation continues, and I don't really understand how what's produced here affects inflation anyway. But again, you know, existing operations continue, new conventional operations are allowed, even a new approved operation like Santa Maria Energy's operation, if they can show that you know, not allowing them to go forward would cause a taking, and they can come in and get an exemption, can still go forward. We'd love to see this transition to more renewable energy, which actually will benefit the economy and provide more jobs. So I think a path away from fossil fuels toward clean energy will definitely benefit the economy, and so will address you know, any of these concerns.
I'd like to respond to that. That's all great. I agree. But the reality today is California is importing over between 1 and 1.3 million barrels of oil. I talked about that carbon intensity earlier, and I didn't get a chance to finish my comment. The oil we produce here onshore in the most environmentally stringent place on the planet is less than half as much carbon in it as the oil that they would have us import by shutting down the industry here, by shutting down increased production. Let's sidestep this existing argument, which clearly is going to affect existing production. Let's talk about future oil. We have it here. We have the regulations. We have the resource. Instead, we're sending $100 million a day, every day, out of California to countries that don't like us, and I know a lot of them are funding things we don't like even more, and our young sons and daughters are over there in harm's way. That's the issue here. The issue is about stopping imported oil in here and producing our own while we continue to work diligently. Oil companies and environmentalists, we're all environmentalists. Together, that's the conversation. This is a dysfunctional thing that they're suggesting. They're trying to jump beyond the realities and impose some ideological airy-fairy thing that seems to think if we stop oil today, then we're going to move into this nirvana tomorrow. It is just not going to happen. We need to have fact-based decision-making. Thank you.
And I will add that every environmental organization in town just about has endorsed Measure P, so we are concerned about the carbon intensity of the oil. That includes transportation. Oil is sold on the global market. What the oil that we produce here is not used in our local gas stations. It is all transported out of the county to be refined elsewhere. You mentioned it going up to the Bay Area. That area now, we now can export. We now export fuel Fuel exports have actually doubled in the last 5 years from the United States. So it is a global market. It will go where the demand is. I'll tell you what isn't a global market though. Water. Water is local. Water is, we have what is in the ground under our feet and in our lakes, which are drying up. That's what we need to protect. And there are places in Colorado, they've had their water prices have been driven up because they were competing. Agriculture was competing with oil for water, and they've seen their water prices go up. Water is a local market. So I would be concerned about that if it's contaminated or if they really need to ramp up the use of water. So that would be my concern.
Let me just respond to that. First of all, it's absolutely incorrect to say that there are exports going out of the state in California. First of all, we need all that's produced here. Second of all, there is a federal law that prohibits the export of crude oil from the United States unless the president grants you an exception. I don't think we've talked to President Obama lately.
No.
We are a net user of oil. We need to import the oil that we don't produce here. And then all of the oil in California stays in California because we have such stringent air emission standards. The refineries here refine the oil to such a degree that it doesn't make sense to use it out of the state. It must be used in the state. So any suggestion that we're exporting oil is absolutely false. Next, with respect to water, we've talked about how we're using water. We've talked about the fact that we're using non-potable, recyclable water where there's an excess. The county has to pay to dispose of it if we don't use it. We're paying for that water. Secondly, there are other situations where, for instance, Chevron in Kern County, they are producing 9 barrels of brackish seawater again with every barrel of oil. They are a net producer of water. They take that water, they clean it to such a degree that they give it to the farmers next to them to use for irrigation. So we're providing solutions. We are working together with the community.
Thank you. What is the specific impact of Measure P on jobs? Again, emphasis on what is the specific impact of Measure P on jobs.
We're going to get different answers on that one, I bet. Almost 2,000 jobs, according to the UCSB economic study commissioned by the Santa Maria Chamber of Commerce. Not the oil industry, as I understand it's been accused. Almost 2,000 jobs, direct, indirect, induced jobs, to the tune of almost $300 million into our economy. Now that $300 million, by the way, that was based on 2011 production numbers. Currently producing 12,000 barrels onshore here. So let's take about 25% of that and add on to it, so it's well over 300 million. Those are UCSB numbers. So, to slough this off, to slough that young mother off and her family, it's like, well, it's just a casualty as we move on. Why don't you try to get a tourism job or something? Those are jobs that you cannot raise families on. It's just amazing, the callous nature of this. The facts are that. This is going to have a real impact on real people, real families. And so that's the response to how it's going to affect jobs.
I'll respond to that. So the number he cites of 2,000 jobs and 300 million, that is 1% of our economy. We have a 200,000 person workforce. At 2,000 is 1%. So compare that to 12,000 people in wine and ag and tourism. So there's disproportionate, a big difference here. And none of those jobs are impacted because this exempts current oil operations. So I think it's callous to be scaring people, these existing workers, and telling them that they're going to lose their jobs. Because they're not. What we're talking about is the future. We're trying to head off this big increase that is going to put our water and health and water at risk, because spills are inevitable. They happen all the time. There was a spill last month in Orchid that shut down a road of oil, over 1,000 gallons of oil. It happens all the time, and the more we ramp up these more extreme high-intensity techniques, the more those risks increase. And we should know better. And lastly, there have been studies of counties that base their economy on fossil fuel, on oil extraction, fossil fuel extraction over the long term. They've studied them. And those that have a higher percentage of their economy based on fossil fuel production actually perform worse over the long term by many economic measures. They have higher unemployment, they have lower wage growth, because there's this other impact. So you don't have this other growth in other industries that are actually have better long-term prospects. Oil is sort of a boom and bust. So they have a lot of temporary workers and then they leave, and it's a finite resource that eventually runs out. So better for our long-term economy is to pass Measure P. That keeps the status quo, lets us grow in other areas. So you don't have to choose between the environment and the economy here. Both are better off if Measure P passes. That's the status quo. The question is, do you want this big increase that's going to damage our county in the future or not?
I would just like to read again from the county auditor's fiscal impact statement about Measure P, which confirms that nothing existing is going to be shut down. We need to put that myth to rest, and that jobs and the economy actually may increase if new oil and gas reserves are discovered and are extracted using primary or conventional recovery methods. So we can't predict the future, but we do know that nothing existing is going to be shut down. If new oil and gas reserves are discovered, and if they are produced using traditional conventional methods, not these risky methods, then you may even have some new jobs. Also, as Katie mentioned, we do have this great opportunity to be transitioning into jobs in other sectors as well that don't conflict with the oil and gas industry and that can move us towards a more sustainable energy future.
My understanding is the oil and gas industry in this county has been operating for 100 years. There's not a boom and bust going on there. This has been a very important part of our community for a long time. I see a lot of people out in the audience right here who've been involved with it, who've made careers in it. If you compare the wages between the oil and gas industry and the wages that are paid in the tourism and ag industries, I think you're going to see a huge discrepancy. These are good, head of household, high-paying jobs. To say that the oil industry is not going to be shut down, that existing production will continue, is an absolute fallacy. If you look at the language of the statute, it very specifically says it prohibits the county from issuing any modification, any revision, any change to an existing permit that's out there. So think about it. Think about your computer. You have a computer at home. You get the software on that computer on day one. You're never allowed to update it. You're never allowed to maintain it. You're never allowed to fix it. How long is that computer going to last? It's going to be gone. That's the problem here. Those existing jobs will go away. And the fact is, the reason why 100% of the wells that are being proposed in this county at this time are using enhanced oil recovery techniques that have been used safely in this county for decades. The reason why is the primary recovery is not working. We need to use enhanced recovery now. These safe and responsible techniques. So the real dream is that to suggest that we're going to create this whole new oil fields where we're going to be able to just drill and get oil out of it and create new jobs. That's not going to happen if Measure P passes. Thank you.
What do you see are the specific impacts of Measure P on home prices? So the specific impact on home prices.
I would suggest that if Measure P passes, there's going to be a whole lot of people having to sell their homes because there's not going to be jobs here for them.
Ditto.
Jobs are not impacted. We will be better off. The economy will be better off if we pass Measure P. The risk is if we have these extreme techniques that it could have a negative impact on property prices. And there have been, that's what's happened in a lot of places. So they did a study in in Alberta, home prices near oil production were less than other places, so you take a hit. In some places, people have completely lost the entire value of their properties. If your water's contaminated, you can't sell that place. I mean, I talked about the people that we talk to who are impacted by oil production right now, and how they smell the fumes and hear the sounds. Like, that properties, you're not going to pay the same amount for that property. And studies back this up. I talked to one woman who lives near some of these big oil fields, and she said, I've lived here my whole life. I took the school bus up here. I don't want to have to move, and I feel like I'm being forced out. I'm being impacted by these operations, this new oil production, and there's nothing I can do about it. They can drill right under my property. I don't own my mineral rights, and I have no choice. So she feels like her property is not going to be worth anything with surrounded by oil wells.
I'd like to give Linda the last word. I only used 1 second of my time with that ditto remark. I want to take on this, myths, fear, high intensity. That's a made-up term to scare us. These are not high-intensity oil operations. They're high-efficiency oil operations. We can produce the oil the most environmentally sensitive way, the most efficient way, using reclaimed, recycled water, much lower carbon emissions. It's amazing to me that these folks continue to try to use scare tactics and fear. High efficiency, not high intensity. You can't look this term up in the dictionary, high intensity, and go, oh, it's enhanced oil recovery because it's got all these negative things. The word high, the word intense. Those are loaded emotional words to get this fear-mongering at a high-pitched level, just like fracking. When they went around signing this petition to get this train wreck on the ballot, you know what they did? How many of you go to your grocery stores and you get accosted by these petition signers? You know what they said? Time and again. They said, are you against fracking? Well, yeah. Well, sign this. Has nothing to do with fracking. There's a fracking ordinance already in the county, and they know that. It would be a full analysis of environmental if anybody was even thinking about it, even though, as Beth mentioned, and the Department of Energy confirmed, when they devalued the amount of technically recoverable resources through this process of hydraulic fracturing, that it's just not feasible here. And if it were, then they'd have to go through a complete comprehensive CEQA environmental review, as Beth mentioned, before it actually can go to the public for consideration. It's not about fracking. The only reason this ballot measure is even on the ballot is because they lied to people about this, that it was about fracking. That is just egregious.
Well,
Yeah.
happy to follow that one. First of all, fracking has been attempted in Santa Barbara County. It was attempted on a private rancher's property. He had no say over the fracking that was conducted by Veneco. He complained about it, but he had nothing to do about it. There was nothing he could do about it because Veneco owned the subsurface mineral rights. And so even though he felt that it was threatening his vineyard operations, he could not do anything about it. It has occurred, is occurring in neighboring counties. It has occurred offshore. It's not necessarily going away. So fracking is still definitely a concern here. The measure addresses various high risk, some not even regulated operations. Fracking is one, acidizing, which we also know is occurring here, is another. The steam injection, which we know is occurring, is another. There's no hidden agenda here. I mean, everything is defined in the initiative. Some of these definitions come directly from the county's own code, some come from state law, but there's nothing hidden here. It's all defined here. There are reasons why these operations are being targeted. There's a reason why existing operations are allowed to continue, and there's a reason why conventional operations are allowed to continue. So nothing hidden, but definitely serious concerns about these types of operations and concerns that they are not, some of them aren't regulated at all right now, and some aren't regulated strongly enough. For example, with SB4, a lot of the impacts, a lot of the chemicals that are used aren't disclosed until after the fact. which is too late to do anything about the impacts, especially if it contaminates groundwater aquifer. So, if you have any questions, just read the measure itself. It's all laid out in plain English. Thank you.
Linda, I have a question. What
May I-
operations are?
I'm sorry, we need to go on. Thank you very much for understanding.
Sure.
What is the specific impact of Measure P on existing mineral and/or property rights? So the impact on existing mineral and/or property rights.
Any existing rights are not affected. Any new regulation cannot affect existing rights. That's a matter of constitutional law, it's a matter of federal law, it's a matter of state law, it's a matter of local law. Existing rights are not affected.
I would say that the mineral owners who have interests below where our project would be located, if we were allowed to go forward, would feel affected. They are no longer going to be able to receive royalty checks on the production of those minerals where we have our mineral leases. So they will be affected. Don't be fooled.
I would just add to that, Ms. Krop says there's all these panaceas out there. Do you know what it ends up doing? It empowers the County Board of Supervisors, none of whom I think are lawyers, to make decisions about the constitutionality of vesting and taking right. It forces them to do that. That's the dirty little deceptive secret of this. Well, we're circumventing our representative system by putting this on the ballot instead of the deliberative process that's fact-based. And now we're turning our County Board of Supervisors into a judge and jury deciding the constitutionality of very complex issues that have to do with vested rights and takings. That's what the Measure P does. And when you read it, as Ms. Krop suggests, you'll see that because it explicitly does that.
So I mentioned the property owners and they're being impacted by these oil operations. So what about our rights to clean air and clean water and not having these visual blight and the sound and the environmental impacts of this kind of operations? I think that takes priority. Clean air and clean water is irreplaceable. We have the right to say we don't want these extreme techniques in our backyards. We don't want to see fracking start up here. And we were very concerned about fracking. And there is no ban on fracking in the county now. And all they need is a permit to do it. Supervisors to approve it. The oil companies have shown willingness to put plenty of money into elections to get the supervisors to votes that they need to do whatever they want. They have certainly put a lot of millions of dollars into this campaign which shows how much they want to ramp up these techniques. And Beth is right. She said that this is different from the conventional oil production we've been doing for the past 100 years. It's true. We have gotten a lot of that easy oil. It had been kind of declining. A lot of the big companies had gotten out of town. They're starting to come back because they realize they can use these more high-intensity techniques to get that oil. The industry is crowing about how exciting it is that they can use fracking and acidizing and steam injection to ramp up production. They're saying we couldn't get to a point where we can export oil and then they want to do that. So they're crowing about this. What we're worried about is this is new. So this is not the same thing that we've been doing for 100 years. This is new. And so the question is, do we want to take the risks that come with that here in Santa Barbara County, where we don't have water to spare? We are in the middle of fault lines. All the problems with these techniques are worse here in Santa Barbara County. This is the worst place to do this kind of very dangerous oil production.
Thank you. The next question. What has been the source of funding for each side of Proposition P or Measure P? Has it been primarily local and/or outside of the area? So this is in regard to the funding for Measure P, each side. Where is the funding coming from?
I'll be glad to start. We are a broad-based coalition of folks that are trying, we didn't bring this initiative forward. We were put on the defensive to try to defend an industry that clearly produces the most clean source of energy that we have, that we, instead of importing it, and yet we're getting just attacked on that. And the local oil companies here, we're all contributing. Our company, we have a certain amount of a budget for external affairs, and what that means is that money we contribute to our community. We had to go back and take that money and put it towards fighting this drastic and flawed and costly initiative. And this boogeyman, they talk about Chevron. Like I said, Chevron is, we're glad Chevron is helping our coalition, because we have to fend this off so we're not importing more oil. And Katie says about clean air, clean water. The 2013 Clean Air Plan shows that our air is being cleaner and cleaner all the time, and yet at the same time oil production's going up. Greenhouse gases. You know what the state has done with greenhouse gases? We have we are supposed to get to a 1990 greenhouse gas level in our atmosphere by 2020. In 2008, the scoping plan that looks at that and tries to help us measure course said we need to reduce by 29% with our economy growing. 2011, it came down to 16%. 2013, it was 15.3%. The greenhouse gases are getting better. The county water study said the oil industry now and into the future using negligible amount of water. So I'm not sure what she's talking about when we need clean air and water. We do, and we have it, and we'll continue to protect it.
So I did go to the county and look at funding recently. Chevron, $1.2 million that they put into this pact. It's a huge amount of money. Freeport-McMoRan, over 400,000. I think Veneco, close to 90. ERG, the Texas and China-owned company, another 90,000 or so. So this is a lot of money from a lot of oil companies that is funding the No on P campaign. The S&P was a very grassroots, I'm a volunteer. This is a real We the People movement. This is a movement of people saying, wait, don't just do this, don't just come and do this kind of extreme extraction. We want to have a say in this and about whether this is appropriate for our county, given the risks we're seeing with the water contamination and water use and earthquakes and climate impacts, we in Santa Barbara County want to make a different choice. So we have had hundreds of individuals, mostly local, often small dollars. Students have put in $5 or $10. He talked about a couple of professors on the other side. We have dozens of professors who are putting in their own money and their own time. Elected officials who are spending, not only endorse this, but have gone and are out there calling voters with us. We have the environmental groups, but we are largely small individual donations from hundreds, over 400 individuals, mostly in Santa Barbara County, of all kinds, farmers and teachers and every kind of person. This is a We the People movement. This has really been gratifying and amazing to be part of. And it gives me a lot of hope for the future that people are willing to step forward and protect our county.
Does it surprise anyone that the oil companies are contributing to a shutdown initiative, to prevent a shutdown initiative? Our very jobs, our industry, our livelihoods are at stake here. And again, despite the proponents' attacks on us and their attempts to make us look like these horrible oil companies who don't care about anybody, that's simply not the truth. We are real people who live here in the community, and you're trying to take away our livelihood. And the fact is, we're producing a resource that every single person in this room uses. So we're all collectively, we're a coalition of people trying to make our lives a better place. And we've talked about the technology that oil companies are using to make the oil fields safer, more responsibly produced. And cyclic steaming is not new, Katie. It's been used for over 50 years in the county. Back in November 2013, we stood right here when we got approval for our project, and no one complained about it being a cyclic steam project. Everyone there was in favor of it, called us a model applicant. So I don't know how this happened.
Our county is not for sale.
No. That was a low blow.
Oh, boy.
Low blow.
And I hope we tell Tom Steyer that.
We have more questions, but in view of the time to be able to conclude around noon, we're going to have to ask for concluding statements. And if you would be so kind, we will go in the reverse order for concluding statements, which means we will start with Bob Poole first, followed by Linda Krop. Third will be Beth Marino, and concluding will be Katie Davis. So again, we ask that you allow no more than about 2 minutes per your statement. Mr. Poole?
Thank you. Well, I would urge you to vote no on Measure P. Don't let this minority of folks who have this misguided view of how we deal with our energy policy. They want us to import more oil overseas. Whether they'll state it or not, that is the unintended negative consequence of Measure P. Currently onshore here in Santa Barbara County, in the most environmentally sensitive way, we are producing over 4 million barrels of oil a day. And by the way, you talk about these obscene profits of the big oil. You know, we make on average 7% return on investment in our risk capital. They're bigger numbers because this is a very expensive and technologically and capital intensive industry. We still only make 7% roughly return on investment. So we're not these big money people that are trying to buy Santa Barbara County, apparently. Quite the contrary. The hypocrisy of this thing is that we are going to import all those barrels overseas. No, nothing they can do or say is going to stop that if we are not allowed to produce this oil here onshore like we have for over 100 years. This measure is drastic, it's flawed, and it's costly. It's deceptive. It's not about fracking. And Ms. Krop mentioned that there was fracking. There were 2 wells fracked by Veneco. And the reason that there are no more wells fracked is because they confirmed what the Department of Energy and the geology says. This place is not conducive to it. And there is an ordinance in place, and there are regulations in case somebody were foolhardy enough to try to put a process through there. So again, I urge you to vote no on Measure P. It's a train wreck. It's just going to make us import more foreign oil. It is drastic, flawed, and costly. Thank you.
Thank you again for taking time out of your precious weekend to join us. And I have to say, it's been really cool sitting up here because I've always been on the other side. And not only am I sitting up here, but I actually have mute buttons that I want to let you know I did not use.
You were tempted though, weren't you?
It was very, very tempting because I'm in the chair seat. So I kept my hands down here, and I really appreciated the frankness of our conversation today. I think you've heard a lot of information. I hope you do go back. You definitely have time to do your own research and consult with experts that you trust, or reach out to some additional experts and make sure you get as much information as you can. I do also urge you to read the measure yourself. Don't rely on what other people tell you it says, because it is very clear why the proponents put this measure forward, their concerns about impacts to our community and our environment. But it also tells you very specifically what kind of operations it applies to, which again are just these new intense operations. The fracking, the acidizing, the steam injection does not apply to anything existing. On top of that, there's even exemptions to allow new projects to go forward that would otherwise be banned. There's a great process being considered by the county right now, and I mistakenly said that the hearing at the board is next Tuesday. It's actually Tuesday, October 7th. So I also encourage you to attend that hearing, which describes how an operator can come in through the county process, don't need to run to court to get an exemption from the initiative. But we believe that its time has come and that we have a lot of experience here dealing with oil and gas operations, both onshore and offshore, and this is the reasonable compromise path forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank everybody for coming here to listen to us today. We appreciate the league for putting on this forum. I think it's an important part of the voting process. We are very fortunate to live in a very affluent community where we use lots of energy. And we all should be doing our part to curb our energy use and look for ways to conserve. But it's the height of arrogance to believe that we should not use the resource that is under our very feet and rely upon foreign countries to provide that resource to us. We operate under the strictest laws in the world. Santa Barbara has done an extremely good job of putting in a very careful planning process. That's why the oil industry has been in this county for over 100 years, and you hardly see it. If you wouldn't be able to see our the Orchid oil field if you were driving down the road. We've used technology to create oil fields that are the height of technology, of compact space, and we benefit the whole community. All of the current operations that are being proposed in the county are highly regulated. As I asked Ms. Krop, I'd like to see where she thinks they're not regulated, because that's one of my jobs for the company is going through the regulatory process to try and get permits. And let me tell you, it takes a long time, and there's a lot of people that I need to talk to and get approvals from, and there's a lot of conditions and mitigations put in place. We have the proper protections in place for this county. Please vote no on Measure P.
Listen, this Measure P has no impact on global oil market or imports of oil or gasoline prices. Oil and gas use in the U.S. is actually going down. It's been going down for some time. The fuel efficiency standards that were passed will save billions and billions of barrels of oil. We don't need to get every last drop of oil out of the ground in Santa Barbara County. It will have any economist will tell you it has no impact on gas prices. What we need to be concerned about is the risks of ramping up these very extreme extraction techniques. 800 new wells applied for in the last 6 months. It's almost doubling when you look for the current oil production. So we're looking at a huge increase using very risky techniques if we don't pass Measure P. Measure P is our opportunity to decide if that's what we want to see in Santa Barbara County. If it passes, we'll have the status quo, because current oil production will continue, but it will head off this big increase in these more extreme techniques. And if we do that, spills are inevitable. Spills happen all the time. We've had enough spills in our county using conventional techniques. Greca Energy, 500,000 gallons over a short period of time. They're still paying the county for some of the environmental damage. So we think we can do these more extreme techniques and not have those risks. We averaged 20 spills a day last year in the United States of oil and gas and fracking fluids. We don't want to see that here. We have a high population. This is not the middle of North Dakota or somewhere. This is a heavily populated, very beautiful, very biodiverse place with a GDP. We have a lot to lose. And we have a place that's covered in fault lines. We have limited water. And we have an opportunity to really lead the state and the nation in transition to clean sources of energy. So this is the worst. All the problems are particularly bad here, and the opportunities are particularly good here. We have a very stark choice in front of us about what kind of future we want to create for ourselves and our children. So please, I urge you to vote yes on Measure P for a better future, and a vote for a healthy future with a clean climate and a clean county. Thank you.
There are many thanks that are in order today. Thank you to you panelists for educating us. Thank you. Thank you to all of you in the audience who took the time to come. Thank you also for those of you that handed in questions. If yours was not addressed, we just blame it on a lack of time. A couple of other things. Many thanks go out to our co-sponsor, the Santa Maria Times, who have been webcasting this live. And also, it's going to be aired on Santa Maria Community TV, which is Channel 25, Comcast Cable. They also are airing the 2 other forums that the league has sponsored, those being the City Council Forum last Saturday and the School Board Candidates Forum for the Santa Maria Bonita School District and the High School District, which was last Wednesday night. So if you have friends who want to become informed like you, let them know about that. Also, in the back, the League of Women Voters puts out 2 publications, the pros and cons, and also the Easy Voter Guide. Be sure and take a copy if you haven't already and use them, share them with your friends also. Also, the last things that are in order are to the various league members and anybody else who helped put on today's activity. So thanks again, and lastly, remember to vote Tuesday, November the 4th. Thank you.
Yeah.